Think about a door in your house. We all have this door. Could be a bedroom, it could be a cupboard, but we all have a door. You know, some of us have a spare room, and we close the door because that spare room is no longer a spare room. It has now become a storage room. Anybody have that in their house, a storage room? Or that cupboard that you close and when guests come over, you don't ask me what's in there. It's not your business. Because you know that you had to clean your house when they came over, and if you open that door, everything you cleaned your house is in that cupboard. If you ever visit me, that would be the reality, okay? If you visit my wife, different story. But we all have these spaces and places that we decided early on, it's easier to shut that door than to sort it out. And if we're honest, our hearts work in the same way. There are doors we just won't open anymore. Not because we've forgotten what's behind them. We very well know what's behind the door, but because we know that conversation that we've rehearsed but never had, it has an effect on us. The pain that we've learned to live with instead of heal through, it has an effect on us. Moments that we've quietly labeled, do not enter. We've become experts at managing the hallway, keeping the outside looking nice and clean, but on the inside, we're dealing with rooms that have been untouched by Jesus. Rooms that remain uncluttered with grief, disappointment, fear. And if, like that messy room at home, the longer it stays closed, the more intimidating it eventually becomes to deal with. But here's the thing. Everybody tell the person next to you, here's the thing. Avoiding the door doesn't clean the room. It just delays the freedom. Avoiding the door doesn't clean the room. It just delays the freedom. And Jesus died on the cross and he rose again to bring us freedom. And Easter, Resurrection Sunday, is a reminder, it's an announcement that Jesus walked through the most impossible doorway of all, and that was death, but he rose again and he went through this for us. He went through this doorway for our salvation. He went through this doorway for a new life that we can live. He went through this doorway so that we could have hope and have peace and experience the presence of God in a tangible way. He went through this so he could open a doorway to a new life. And so today there's an invitation, just keep that in the back of your head, there's an invitation for a new life. Whether you've stepped into church for the first time or whether you've been a Christian for years on years, there's an invitation to a new way of living, a different way of doing things, a different way of expressing your love to people and to Jesus. And so Jesus said in John 10 verse 9, I am the door. I am the door. Whoever comes through me will be saved. I am the door. The message this morning is simple. Every doorway that Jesus went through for you has become a doorway he opened for you. We can only enter the doorway because he first went through it on our behalf. The question is, which doorway are you standing in front of this morning? What are you facing right now? What is the doorway that's in front of you right now? There's a few doorways that we can see in the story of Jesus' resurrection in John. And the first doorway that we actually notice is the doorway of hope. Everybody say, the doorway of hope. John 20 verse 1 says, early on the first day of the week. Early. You see, second service, this is much easier for you because the first service, they came early on the first day of the week. You're a bit later, so you would have been Peter and John, they were Mary. Early on the first day of the week, while it was still dark. You see, that's already a problem for most of us. And it's getting dark quick now. We wake up and say, why is the sun not out yet? Early in the first day of the week, while it was still dark, Mary Magdalene went to the tomb and saw that the stone had been removed from the entrance. Oh, there's power in this. Because resurrection can begin in the dark. Resurrection can begin in the dark. That matters so much because there's people in this room right now, someone who might be sitting next to you or around you, that came into church feeling a little bit dark today. Physically, you came while the sun was out, but spiritually or emotionally or mentally, you might be in a bit of a dark place. You might be carrying grief and questions and disappointment and weariness and tiredness because you spent so much time off yesterday. And you might have come into church feeling a little bit weird. Like, God, I don't understand what's going on inside of me. And maybe you're here in church and you don't actually believe this Jesus thing, but you thought, let me give it a try. And some of you knew that God was just nudging you to get to church, but I want to remind you that God doesn't just meet you in bright places, He can meet you in dark spaces. He can meet you in the moment of your grief, in the moment of your frustration, in the moment of your anxiety, in the moment of your pain, in the moment of your greatest stress, in the moment of your greatest tremble in your life, the things that you fear most. God can meet you just in that place. Early in the morning, while it was still dark, Mary sees that Jesus is not there. And I believe the gospel wants us to remember that. Jesus can meet you in dark places, in moments in your life that make no sense. He's not questioning your confusion. John 1 verse 5 actually says, the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. The light shines in the darkness. I believe there's an invitation that needs to take place. God, you are invited into my dark moments, because His light can shine. There's already power in His presence in moments like these. So Mary, early in the morning, while it was dark, I'm glad you guys are catching it. Early in the morning, while it was dark at the first service, Mary, early in the morning, while it was dark, went to the tomb. Then Mary sees the stone has been removed. Here's the thing, the stone wasn't moved so Jesus could get out. The stone was moved so witnesses could see in. He's not there anymore. So Mary gets to the tomb and is like, oh my hat, where is Jesus? Witnesses could look in. The doorway of the tomb is open because Jesus has gone through death for us, broken the power of death's hold on our lives. And this is what we remembered on Good Friday. If you were at church, Jesus went through these doorways of death and sacrifice and surrender and exchange for you and for me. And today we have an invitation. You have a doorway to hope. Not death anymore. Things might look dead in your life, but there's an invitation that you can hope again, that you can step through the doorway of death into the doorway of hope, because Jesus is alive. John 11:25 says, I am the resurrection and the life. The one who believes in me will live. That is our prayer for you today, that you will live again, that you would come alive in Christ, that the dead things in your life would also resurrect, that Jesus could do this. You have a hope. This isn't just a poetic verse. I mean, it is beautiful, but it's not just poetic, it's salvation. If Jesus was still in the tomb, then sin still wins. If Jesus was still in the tomb, then death still rules. If Jesus was still in the tomb, then hope is just a sentiment. But it's not, because Jesus walked through death, came out alive, and dead things no longer is the final doorway for you and me. We now have a doorway of hope, those who belong to Jesus. So Mary Magdalene, while it was still dark, early in the morning, y'all are like, again, yes. While it was still dark, early in the morning, Mary goes to the tomb. She sees Jesus isn't there. She eventually shares news to the other disciples that Jesus isn't there. The tomb is open. She goes back. Peter and John are now the characters that come into the scene. And Peter runs to the tomb. I love this. Peter runs to the tomb, and John, who is writing John that we're actually reading now, tells us that he outran Peter. Any competitive people in the house? Like, you want to tell people you won. Peter's being all cocky there. He doesn't tell us how much he won by. It could have just been like, but he's like, I beat him. I just see these two guys, Peter and John. I see them like two typical men. You know, you pull up at a robot next to another man, your friend, and you know your car's not going to win, but you still got to try. If I had to send two men from the church to our offices, we know it's going to be a race. It's never just like, oh, how you doing? The women go to the toilet together. We race. It's competitive. It's so. Peter and John are racing. Their devotion for Jesus, they're running their hearts out. And John tells us that it's okay biblically to be competitive. That's what I get from it. It's okay, because competitive people win. You want to win in life? Surrender. But later on, Peter and John get to the tomb, and John 20 verse 8 says, he saw and believed. John gets to the tomb, he sees it's open, Jesus is no longer there. He saw and believe. And I believe faith begins when people are willing to step toward the open door. God has an open door. He went to the cross. He rose again. The door for new hope in your life, a new way of living. The door is open, but faith begins when you take a step toward the open door. When we take a step toward facing what God actually has done. What does it mean to you? Not just because I'm preaching on it on Easter Sunday or because you came to church on Easter Sunday. It's great that you're here. But what does it mean to you that God went through what he went through? That Jesus faced what he faced? John saw and believed. So where do you need hope, church? Where do you need hope? Not generally speaking, ach ja, it will be lekker to have hope everywhere. No, where do you need hope specifically in your life? What room have you kept closed with stuff inside that needs a little bit of hope? What disappointment have you learned to just live with that needs a bit of hope? What is the situation that feels like it's already over? God, I just need a little bit of hope. We have hope. We have access to hope. Name it, because you can't walk through a door that you refuse to acknowledge. Name where you need hope. I was playing a game with my son on PlayStation yesterday. Yes, I am their dad. We love gaming in our household. My wife hates it, but we love it. And I was playing a game with my son. It's called It Takes Two. So it literally takes two people to play the game. So you need, if you want to skip anything in it, you have to hold two circles on both remotes. If you want to pass a level, you need two brains to figure out what's going on, two remotes. And in this, there's this book of love, because it's around a couple that's going to get divorced, and their daughter's like, I don't want my parents to get divorced. It's really a cool story. But in the story, the book of love says a phrase that I heard last night, and I just had to add it. Now listen up. This is from a game, but it's so powerful. If you stare at a closed door, you'll miss the one that is open. If you stare at a closed door, you'll miss the one that is open. So where do you need hope? Because here's the reality of many of us that walked into church today. We're staring at a closed door. We're staring at disappointment. We're staring at frustration. We're staring at anxiety. We're staring at all the problems in our lives. We're staring at the fuel increase. We're staring at financial issues. We're staring at stress. And we're so focused on this door that's in front of us that we haven't noticed the open door of hope that's right next to us. There is a doorway to hope. There's a doorway to hope. Because Jesus rose again, we have hope, but our eyes need to move from this closed door to what God has done for you and for me. You can move away from the doorway of despair, because there's a doorway of hope. So firstly, we learn the doorway of hope. Then we learn that Jesus opened the doorway of encounter. The doorway of encounter. So Mary Magdalene, early in the morning, while it's still dark. Yes, see, the service is clever, eh? Wow! Early in the morning, while it's still dark, Mary walks to the tomb. She sees it's empty. She calls Peter and John. Peter's running his heart out, but John tells us that he beat him because he's competitive. He gets to the point where they both see and believe that Jesus is no longer in the tomb. Peter and John now leave the scene, and Mary comes and stays a little bit longer. Mary sits at the doorway. This open door, she's weeping her eyes out. I can just picture Mary sitting at this doorway, weeping, lingering, not understanding, confused. What happened? Where is Jesus? I vaguely remember that something like this is supposed to happen, but can you imagine how she felt in that moment? The pain that must have overwhelmed her, the devastation of, where is Jesus? And many of us know that feeling all too well. We come to church, we're involved in holy things, and yet the brokenness still feels so real. Mary sees angels, and it seems that her grief is so heavy that not even the angels could comfort her. She then turns and sees Jesus, but at the time she didn't know that it's Jesus until John 20:16 takes place. Jesus said to her, Mary. Jesus said to her, Mary. Jesus didn't give her a whole 3-point sermon on why he rose from the dead. Jesus didn't correct her for crying her eyes out or being confused or questioning things. Jesus didn't give her a whole explanation. He simply called her by name. See, resurrection becomes real when it becomes personal. Not just coming together as a church on a Sunday, but actually going, this is real to me. Because Jesus called me by name. He didn't just call Mary by name. He called you by name, and you by name, and you by name, and you by name. Because He knows your name. He knows your number. He knows the amount of hairs on your head. So there's a doorway of hope, but there's also an invitation to a doorway of encounter with the King of Kings. We no longer have to go through a priest and a pastor. We can go to the King by ourselves because the veil was torn and a relationship is now possible. So the same voice that conquered death is a gentle voice that calls your name. And in one word, He invites you into this doorway of encounter. Jesus went through the doorway of rejection and suffering and abandonment and sorrow. He went through these. He rose again. He opened this doorway of personal encounter, and He calls you by name. And Isaiah 43 verse 1 actually prophesied this, and it says, do not fear, for I have redeemed you. I have summoned you by name. You are mine. I have called you by name. Mary's not just interested in a truth here. She's interested in a person. I have called you by name. And some of us sitting in church this morning believe the right things, but it's been a very long time since we felt a fresh touch from Jesus. We have the right doctrine, we have the right theology, but we're missing that personal encounter because everything else has become louder in our lives. And today God's inviting us into a doorway. Resurrection Sunday, be reminded that you can come to me personally and I can touch you where you are. And we might think, oh, Mary Magdalene, she woke up early in the morning while it was still dark. Doesn't she just sound perfect? Like for the single guys, she was probably perfect. We probably think like that's why she saw Jesus first, but the Bible also reminds us that Mary herself had a past. They had to deliver her from 7 demons previously, and yet she's the one that encounters Jesus' resurrection first. That to me means nobody in this room is too far gone for the grace of God, for a touch of God, for an encounter with God, to have a personal relationship with Jesus, to experience a touch from the Savior Himself. All hail King Jesus. We hail you, but He knows your name. He knows your name, and He wants a relationship with you. Every doorway that Jesus went through for you has become a doorway He opened for you. So we've got the doorway of hope, this invitation. If you need hope in your life, there's a doorway for that because Jesus died and rose again. If you need an encounter with the personal, loving Savior, King of Kings and Lord of Lords, He can touch you and give you grace, extend grace to you no matter where you find yourself. But there's a third doorway that we see within this story, and it's the doorway of peace. The doorway of peace. So Mary Magdalene, while it's still dark, early in the morning, walks to a tomb, sees that the stone has been rolled. There's nobody inside. She calls some disciples, Peter and John, have a race because they're boys. They're always going to be boys. They love having fun. So they're running. Their devotion to God is there. They love Jesus so much. They're running. John tells us he wins, of course, because he's competitive. They say, we saw and believed. They leave. Mary has this intimate moment of lingering and questioning and confusion and devastation, most likely. And she encounters Jesus because He calls her by name. And He says, Mary. And then the story moves on, and it shows us that John and the disciples now move from an open tomb to a locked room. The tomb is open, but the disciples are closed. Jesus is alive, but they're busy hiding. He saw and believed, but still fear took a grip of them. Isn't that so true for each one of us? We believe Jesus rose again, but sometimes fear takes a grip of us. Anxiety takes a grip of us. Life takes a grip of us. And John 20:19 says, on the evening of the first day of the week, when the disciples were together with the doors locked, because they lived in South Africa, with the doors locked, for fear of the Jewish leaders, Jesus came and stood among them and said, peace be with you. You see, that's not just their story, it's our story. This is a personal story. Many people believe Jesus rose, but we still live behind locked doors. We still stand behind locked doors, locked in fear, locked in doubt, locked in anxiety, locked in depression, locked in stress, locked in worry, locked in frustration, locked in unforgiveness, locked in the family mess that we're going through, locked in financial mess. We're so locked in behind closed doors that we cannot see Jesus being risen. We're stuck in this. But I want to give you good news. We may be locked in. We may be locked into the need of staying in control and locked into the reality that we see and locked into doubt and old mindsets and locked into all these things. But the good news is Jesus on Easter, locked doors do not keep the risen King out. Locked doors don't keep the risen King out. They're all there. We saw and believed. Mary Magdalene early in the morning, shame. But they're all locked in behind a door. And Jesus goes, that's no problem. This isn't a problem. I rose from the dead. Ain't no door going to stop me. So he walks through the door, I'm assuming, because it doesn't tell us that. He just says he appeared. So however he appeared while the door was still locked. He walks in not going like, why are you such chickens? I told you this was going to happen. He doesn't walk in going like, fear not. He doesn't tell them that they could have done better. All you perfect people trying to be better. He doesn't say, oh, why aren't you better? He doesn't. No, he says, peace be with you. Because Jesus doesn't wait for fear to leave the room before he enters. He's bringing the resurrection peace, the cross-purchased peace, the presence-carried peace of Jesus to our lives. So he promises a doorway of peace, and then in John 20:20, after he said this, he showed them his hands and side, and the disciples were overjoyed when they saw the Lord. He showed them the wounds. I believe the wounds matter. He has proof. Even in your life, can I tell you the wounds matter? You've been through stuff for a reason. The wounds matter. So people can go, that used to be, oh, now look at that. It's a scar you can carry with pride. It's something you can go, if Jesus got me through this wound, imagine what he can get you through. But he shows them the wound to prove to them, hey, the cross was needed. I had to do this so that you could be set free, so that there could be a doorway of hope and personal encounter and peace. His presence does what our striving cannot do. His presence brings peace where fear has taken over. His presence brings courage where shame had shut people down. His presence brings clarity where confusion clouds everything. It's his presence. So he shows them the wound, and I love the next phrase, and they were overjoyed. They were overjoyed when they saw the Lord. They were overjoyed when they saw the Lord. I wonder if this could be true for us, that we would get our joy back again. As a people, as a city, as a nation, because we're Christian, that we would carry joy above everything else, because today doesn't stop today. He stays risen tomorrow. He stays risen on Tuesday. He stays risen on Wednesday and Thursday and Friday and the year through until we get to Easter next year, until his return. Jesus will be the risen King. So can we have a joy within us that we serve a risen King, that no matter what locked door we're going through, no matter the hope that we need, we serve a risen King. And so I will carry joy. Miserable Christians, carry joy. 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 That's our prayer for you today, that there would be a return of joy in your life once again, because you experienced the power of a risen King, that there would be joy in your life. Because you went through the doorway of hope, there is joy in your life. Because you had personal encounter with Jesus, there is joy in your life. Because you received the peace which he promised to you, there is joy in your life. There's joy, overwhelming joy, that the world outside would see that you've been with Jesus. Because every doorway that Jesus went through was for you, and has become a doorway that he opened for you. So what area of your life have you kept close to Jesus? What is the fear you've learned to manage rather than trusting the doorway of hope and peace? What is the situation you've avoided and locked in? Because if you don't walk through the door, here's the reality. If we don't walk through the doorways that Jesus opened for us, we stay in rooms that don't stay neutral, but they stay in control. I don't want to be in rooms that control me if they're not from Jesus. I don't want to be in a room where fear is controlling me. I don't want to be in a room where anxiety is controlling me. My wife tells me often, you stress for everything. Yes, I do. I don't want to stay in that room. I don't want to stay in a room where stress is the biggest common denominator. I want to stay in a room where I feel hope. I want to stay in a room where I encounter the presence of Jesus. I want to stay in a room where I can feel the peace of Jesus, where fear isn't the loudest voice, where pain doesn't remain unresolved. But we feel and experience the resurrection power of the King. So right now, as you close your eyes, quietly in your heart, could you be honest with Jesus for a moment? And maybe say something like this: Jesus, this is the door I've kept closed, and I'm inviting you into that space. I'm inviting your hope. I'm inviting your presence. I'm inviting your peace. The doorway of hope, the doorway of encounter, the doorway of peace, the doorway of a new life. Because that's the thing today, as you invite Jesus into those locked rooms, those undealt with things. As you invite Jesus, it's by His power and presence that you can experience and live a new life. The resurrection King isn't meant to just be a moment in history. It's supposed to continue His work in us. The King is always on the move. See, that's the gospel message for you. Jesus went through what you could never carry, so that you could receive that which you could never earn. Once again, Jesus said, I am the door. And if you come to me, you will be saved. I am the door. The stone is rolled away. So the question isn't whether the door is open. We know it's open, and it's going to be open for eternity. The question is, will you walk through that door? Will you walk into a new life? If you give your life to Jesus today, there's a new life for you. But even if you've been saved for years, will you walk into a new life after this morning? A new way of doing things, a new way of thinking, a new way of loving people, a new way of serving people, a new way of speaking to people, a new way of showing respect and honor, a new way of bringing in kingdom principles into your life so that the risen King can be so evident in who you are. Will you walk through that door?